Hey guys, Petey Grizz here. I want to talk about a cool knife I just got in the mail today. It's a clone, and I mean, Swiss Army knife clones generally get a bad name. There are a ton of cheap knockoffs out of there that are just plain poor quality, especially some of the older Chinese models. I've seen ones that weren't even made of steel. They were made out of like pot metal, and the blades and stuff literally will just bend and snap in your fingers. That's how bad they are. But this is not the case with this one. This is an extremely high quality Swiss Army knife copy. It's the Syracuse Knife Company, which is a company from New York, USA, that started in 1904, and their main thing was making straight razors. And in 1935, I from the information I can find on is mostly from all.pocketknives.com. It's a little bit spotty, but basically the consensus seems to be that Camillus must have bought them and started using the brand as their own, or making the knives for Syracuse Knife Company in 1935 and continued to do so thereafter. But in 1975 and 1976, they imported knives from Poland under the Syracuse Knife Company name. But anyway, let's get to the knife itself. This is a 4-rivet exposed pin design. Now, if you know a little bit about the early Swiss Army knives, the officers' knives originally had 4 exposed rivets, and then after 1908, they went to 3 rivets. So I believe it was this rivet here would be hidden, but you would still see the other 3 rivets. It might be the other rivet. I could be wrong about that. But either way, there was only 3 rivets exposed. So when you have an early Swiss Army knife and it has 4 rivets exposed, it's a sign of an early one. Of course, that doesn't apply to this, but just saying that's the look they were trying to go for here. It has the European style awl, and it's just a well-built knife. So it's got stainless steel liners. The machining is excellent. Everything is nice and flush here. I have other knives by other makers where the liners and the springs do not meet flush, and that doesn't necessarily affect functionality, but it is a sign of how much quality they put into their fit and finish. It has this cool eagle inlay, and this is, from what I understand, this is a crown eagle, I believe, and it's also, the Polish coat of arms features a crown eagle in their coat of arms, so I suspect that's why the eagle's here. I think it's interesting that Camillus chose to stick with that eagle inlay. I guess they figured the eagle is also an American symbol, so it would work over here, but since this is made in Poland, I strongly suspect that this is meant to be a Polish symbol. But anyway, start with the opening layer. This thing has incredible pull, has great snap, and it has this little dinky can opener, which I think is a little weak, a little suspect, but I'm sure it would work just fine. But it's just smaller than can openers I'm used to looking at. It gets very thin up at the point. I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to break or bend this can opener, but I'm sure if you were careful with it, it would work just fine. It's not, there's other knives, the 1946 to 51 Victorinox can openers weren't much larger, so, you know, there's that. The other side, we have the ever so popular bottle opener, which, you know, as everybody knows, it's not a multi-tool without a bottle opener and a screwdriver. And this is, you know, the shape's not quite the same as a Victorinox, but it is of substantial, you know, thickness and quality. And the edge here is interesting. It's angled, but it's not quite sharpened. If it was a little sharper, it would be cable stripping. I don't know why it's angled like that and not all the way sharpened. I don't know if somebody later polished this down or what, because something I'll show you later makes me think this knife was heavily restored. But anyway, so there's the bottle opener. And again, you can hear that great snap. And the next layer is the scissors. One thing with clones that you'll see is a lot of times the clone companies, rather than put the nail nick on the scissors on the back side of the blade on this side, they would add a hump here in the middle, so there could be a nail nick in the middle and having all the nail nicks face the same direction. And I guess there's something to be said for that argument, have the nail nicks all face the same direction. But generally, if you see a hump on the scissors, that's almost always the mark of a poor quality knife. So anyway, flip it around, open these scissors up. But when you have the nail nick facing this way, it actually puts the scissors in the perfect position for when you to leave the knife right into the perfect grip for that. These scissors are a little stumpy. I have a Salesman here, which this is the closest Victorinox equivalent. And you see that the scissors are well built. It's not that they're poor quality, but by design, they added a little more meat here and moved the rivet up a little higher than they should be, leaving the actual blades a little stumpy, in my opinion. I think the rivet being moved back and given some more edge to the blades would be great, but they work perfectly fine. I tested them on some paper. They cut just as fine. It's just it just looks a little wonky to my eye. Single leaf spring design, which was, this was designed to mimic one of the vintage Swiss Army knives when this was made. So it wasn't meant to look like the Swiss Army knives that were available in 1975. It was meant to resemble the Swiss Army knives that were available in the 1950s, 1940s, and thereabouts. And then finally, the most important layer, the blade layer, we have a pen blade, as usual. This pen blade has a stamp on it, which says product of Poland, 357. I would just guess that 357 is probably their model number and designation for this part. Their stamp on the back of the pen blade. Pen blade, I don't know if it was made that small or if it's worn. When I show the main blade, I'll show you why. I suspect that these are worn down and somebody has heavily restored it and, removed rust or something, removed pitting and polished them down. Because when I show you the main blade, you see what I'm talking about. The main blade has a stamp, Syracuse Knife Company. Nothing on the back. And I feel that this blade was, sharpened many times, worn down, probably had gouges in it. I can see just some light remains of what used to be gouges in the blade. When I shine it in the light, you might be able to see those lines near the nail nick. But I suspect this was larger when it was original. Part of the reason for that is the tip of the blade almost comes out of the covers here. And that's what happens when you keep sharpening a blade. Eventually the edge moves up and the tip moves back and starts to move up too. And eventually you have to start filing down the tang here, the kick of the tang, so that the blade will drop fully in. Because this blade I can push it down. It has plenty of room, so it's not like it's going to have any blade wrap. It's just that tang, I will file that down a little bit to get this blade. It's not really grabbing, but it's starting to. So I'd prefer to have that not do that. Now we have the European three-sided quarter round awl, whatever you want to call it. Beautiful awl. Not razor sharp at the tip, but I think some awls, they tend to go so sharp that the tips are fragile. I think you don't need a razor sharp tip to punch through leather. You need a sturdy tip that's not going to just snap off easily when it hits the, if you're punching leather on top of a wooden bench or something like that, you don't want the fine tip of an awl to break off in the bench. So I think this is a good halfway point between being too sharp and too dull. And then the thing that really got me excited about this knife is the square Phillips driver. And this one happens to have the integrated nail file. And this nail file actually works quite well. And I think that's a great use of space. Victorinox used to have them. And then in the 70s, around 72, 73, they stopped doing, maybe it might have been earlier, it might have been right around 70. In my examples, anything before 70 has the file here, but then they stopped having the file and added the can opening tip, which I would trade the can opening tip for that file because I just think that's a great use of a flat surface that otherwise serves no purpose. I love the square Phillips look because it just, it just fits so tightly into the back of the knife whereas the round ones leave you a little opening here and here, and I just think that, you know, the square Phillips just looks so much better. You know, this is about it. I didn't measure it because frankly, I don't care. But it's roughly 87, 88 millimeters. Here's an 85 millimeter Wenger, and it's just a touch longer than the 85 millimeter Wenger. So, you know, the Victorinox being 84 millimeters, it gets just a hair shorter than the Victorinox. So it is a well-built, high-quality knife. If you ever see one, I'd snag it up. It's going to be fun for me. I'm going to carry this instead of carrying my Salesman because, you know, this was a $30 knife. So if I lose this, I'm not going to be too worried about it. I think 30 might have been paying a little more for it than... I think 30 is an appropriate price for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could find them for cheaper simply because clones do generally have a bad name. But this is a well-built knife, you know, imported by a known maker of quality stuff. So there's no reason that it shouldn't be a good knife, and I think it will serve me well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Petey Grizz out.